Hi. Let me get these plugged in. Happy Monday. Amazing. Okay. So excited for this. Always so excited for these and to talk to my clients, but so excited to talk to you guys today about speaking. Let me see if I can tag Laurie-Ann. Laurie-Ann, if you're on here, maybe just comment. That will probably be easier, so I don't have to turn this thing. If you're on, say hi. Basically, today we are talking about speaking and growing a business from that, how Laurie-Ann did that. She is somebody that has used speaking at every stage of her business to get her first client, to grow, all of that kind of stuff. And I think that's really amazing to see because so many, so many of our stories are all different. We all use different tools and different strategies. And that's something I'm really trying to show on this series is like, there's not one way. There are a lot of ways. Speaking happens to be the one Laurie-Ann used, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But like, it might be for you. It might not be for you. The whole point is you get to do it your way. Hello, my darling. How you doing?
Hi.
Can you hear me?
How are you?
Good. I'm
I
so
can hear
happy
you
to
great.
see your face. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm excited to.
All right. So probably most people in the community know who you are, but I would love for you to just start by giving us like a little introduction. Tell them who you are, tell them what you do, and then I will ask you all the questions.
All the good, juicy questions.
Yes.
I come to the world from professional speaking and just kind of took a little pivot a couple of years ago, and now I teach people how to leverage the platform. The platform being whether that's stages or podcasts or live streaming, so that you can get visible, sell out your programs, and most importantly, monetize your intellectual property.
So good. All right, guys, thank you for being here. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Jessica. If you're here, say hi. So I think something that is really cool about the way you just led with that and what you just said that I was going to ask you to touch on a lot today, but I think so many people think speaking and they just think of like stage, right? Or like event or thing, right? And I personally was guilty of that too. I never really thought of myself as like speaking when I was doing like a live stream or a podcast. And then I started speaking at events and I was like, oh, this is like the exact same shit. And it clicked for me. But it's interesting because I think I could have leveraged a lot earlier on in my business if I had taken that mentality. So just speak to that a little bit because I think that's super helpful. Hey, Megan. Hey, Jessica.
So let me just share with you a statistic. There are literally 7,500 speaking opportunities every day, and that number is just here in the US.
That's wild.
7,500 comes down to, everybody, 150 opportunities today and 150 tomorrow per state. So, and those are just the in-person things.
Right.
So it's stages, podcasts, live streams. You go to a networking event, like a sales pitch, just anything where you are sharing your information and to get you in front of people.
You know what I really love about this too is so a lot of clients will come to me and they're, they've maybe like had a lot of success in other arenas or other areas or whatever. And they're like, but online is so different, right? And it's like, I mean, sure, like I get where they're coming from and what they're saying, but I think what's so cool about this is what we're saying is like, if this is something you get really good at and you nail, it's actually not really different. Like the thing you deliver on a live stream might be the exact thing you deliver at, like on a stage next week. And like when you can nail that, it's so different. But I think that that's so comforting in a way where it's not like, well, there's this whole thing you have to learn here. And then there's this whole different thing you have to learn here, right?
Right. And you can use basically the same format on a podcast, on a stage, on your live stream. Once you know what that format is and how to put everything together, it becomes super easy.
So good. Okay, so if you guys are listening, I'm going to obviously ask Laurie-Ann a bunch of questions, but what are you most interested to hear her talk more about? Like using it online, like in terms of like live streams, podcasts, stuff like that? Or are you way more interested in hearing about leveraging it in person, like how to get speaking gigs in person? Tell me that below and I'll direct my questions accordingly. But just super curious what you guys are most interested in. But what I would love to start with is just how you started this business, because obviously in knowing you, I know that like speaking was not necessarily like the natural thing for
No,
you or the
right.
natural route. And I think that's something people think a lot too, is like, well, I have to be like, you know, like this natural speaker, this natural like stage person to be able to do it. So just share with us like in kind of getting into this world and starting your business, what that looked like.
Okay, so what most people don't know about me and are surprised to hear is that I'm actually a reformed, painfully shy introvert,
Yeah.
where I literally couldn't even make eye contact with people. I was an expert at tile floors and sneakers, and I went from that to becoming an award-winning speaker. And I share that because, you know, it's a learned skill. Like nobody has the
Yes.
speaker DNA. It's just it's something that you learn to do. And
I
actually,
think
I think
sales
there's
is like that too, right? Mm.
yes, absolutely. And there's some studies that are out there that say, you know, like introverts actually make great speakers. Introverts make great
Mm,
salespeople.
mhm.
So I just kind of like share with people that, you know, like I know what you mean, like not wanting to like getting those butterflies and nervousness and the cold sweat to speak in front of even just to introduce
Yeah.
yourself. But I've done it and it's, you know, become something that you know, I kind of enjoy it now.
You know what I think? Sorry, hold on, I gotta fix this thing. You know what I think is funny too is that like even being able to like notice that sometimes you do have to push yourself like to you know like you enjoy it now, but you're not like, oh, I've always been a natural and I've always loved it. And I'm such a believer in like do stuff you love, but also it doesn't mean it's not difficult, and it doesn't mean you don't have to push yourself, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't take a lot of comfort zone stretching to get there. Like I know for me, I'm like a huge introvert, and like being on video at the beginning of my business was very challenging for me, but I wanted to do it and I love doing it now. But I think it's so good to just remember like that doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? Mm.
Right, right. You just it's we just learn and just to like I encourage my clients just to figure out like what platform do you feel most comfortable
Right.
on? And so gravitate to that one and enjoy it.
And I think it's so nice too because we're set up in a world where like you can pick if you don't want to be on camera, be on podcasts. If you don't want to be on video, be on a stage. If you don't want to be on a stage, like there's just so many options, right? Mm.
Yeah, and I probably should share how I got into this.
Absolutely. Sorry. I derailed us. Hit me. Hit me with it.
It's okay. Um,
Hi, Jillian. Hi,
I I
Monica.
was at this point in my life where I was just kind of like getting tired of hopping on planes to commute to work, so to speak, and was just like, hey, I am open to a new business model, and it came in the form of a text message from
As
somebody
they
who'd seen me
do.
speak a couple of times. Yes. And the text message said, "LaurieAnn, do you write speeches for people?" And my answer was, "No, but who is this?" And because it was somebody that I knew, I said, "Oh, let's sit down for coffee. Tell me what's going on." She had a side hustle that she was just 5 years into her side hustle that she'd been losing money at. And she was like, "Can you help me?" And I was like, "Oh, I can teach you how to get booked. I can teach you how to leverage those opportunities, and I can teach you how to, you know, like get spin-off business."
Yeah.
And she, after her first presentation, we worked together. After her first presentation, she got referred to two other groups to speak for, and she walked away with three full paying new clients. And I was like, that's a home run.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
wonder if anybody else would be interested in this information. And that's when I kind of took this pivot.
I think that's so valuable to see too, because for two reasons. One, I think that one thing that we've been talking about a lot on this series, and pretty much everyone I think that's been on so far has had some kind of pivot in their business at one point or another, right? And I think it's just so valuable to see that like the dream for a lot of people is like flying all over and speaking. And for you, that was like not quite feeling like the dream anymore. And so you kind of just stayed open to like a new opportunity and it popped up. And I think that like that's always the magic is just kind of like being willing to be like, I love this. And what would feel better is this, right? Mm.
Yes. Even a lot of my speaker friends, they start off with one topic and they do at some point in their career, they just kind of pivot for whatever
Yeah.
reason. It could just be technology has changed, their interest has changed, they want a different audience.
Yeah. So like if you're listening to this, permission to pivot, like definitely don't like change your message every 2 weeks and throw spaghetti at the wall. But like if you're noticing like that your business model isn't serving you in the way you want it to, like there's always somebody else that wants that support. Like it shows up in the form of a text message or some other way, but like of course that was so perfect, but it's like the thing that's right in front of your face too. Like of course you could teach people to do that, but it like didn't even occur to you at the time, right?
No, no, it didn't. Not at
And
all.
so as you kind of transitioned, like you still speak, but you try to concentrate way more in not having to do these like huge trips all the time. You more speak locally when you can. You do a lot of like live streams and online speaking and podcasts and stuff like that. So how has that pivot like impacted your business and how has that felt for you?
So when I first started doing this online business and, business mentoring, I still had speaking engagements on my calendar. So they were all for leadership because that's what I used
Right.
to speak about, leadership and impact. And so then I just kind of had to start this other website so that you wouldn't confuse my customers. And so, yeah, like now it's just like I've transitioned nicely
Yeah.
over to the, so it's speak and stand out, and people are knowing me for this, and they're hiring me to teach audiences about, like speaking and workshops on how to get started, how to find those opportunities or create those opportunities.
Totally. I think something else that's interesting, and by the way, guys, if you have questions for LaurieAnn, feel free to share them with us. If you're watching now or watching the replay, she can answer them too, because I feel like speaking always brings up a ton of questions. But I think something that's like really interesting here too is that like you built a very successful speaking business off of not speaking about entrepreneurship or whatever. It was about speaking on leadership. And I think I always love to like illustrate stuff like that because like Rita was on and obviously she built another business as a date coach, and I feel like there's such like a misperception in our world that like you have to be a business coach or you have to be speaking to entrepreneurs to be really successful. And I think it's just like so beautiful to see like you were just as successful speaking to corporations, speaking on leadership, speaking on impact. Like it's really about like how you show up for it, right?
Yeah, and I was doing a lot of, executive coaching, had written a couple of books. So there was like all these different ways that I was, kind of sharing my information with other people and being able to, change their lives.
Yeah. And like what's so cool is to see how that translates too, right? That's all you're doing now is sharing information, sharing value, coaching, teaching, and transforming. It just looks so totally different, kind of, right?
Does. It does, and it's so, it's fun and it's fresh and it's new. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's not to say that I didn't have to learn something new. Coming, like I was used to picking up the phone and talking to meeting planners, meeting them at conferences, having those in-person meetings to,
Yeah,
switching over to this online.
totally.
It's been
So
a great transition for me.
tell us like what have been your favorite pieces, and then also, of course, we want to hear what have been the hardest.
What has been my favorite piece? I would have to say it's learning something new, really creating a new business model. I mean, when I first left my corporate job, like no business plan, no marketing skills, didn't quite know what I was going to do, and just figured it out.
Yeah,
But I've had a couple of other successful businesses. I had a healthcare consulting, did the coaching, the speaking. So I think I was just like also just ready for like this is new, and this is a great way for me to actually have a global audience
yeah,
instead of flying to a conference and only speaking to whatever number of people are there, 200, 500, 600 people that are in attendance. So
totally.
I think that, so the fun part is just engaging with people and letting them know this is possible, because so many people are like, I never thought of using speaking as my best form of marketing. And I'm like,
Totally.
"Yeah," and there's so much opportunity that's out there. And what's that statistic that like 95% of people are afraid of public speaking? Like,
Right,
I have no
totally. Yeah,
idea
yeah.
where that study actually comes from. I've got some theories, but I say, thank goodness.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
if 95% of the room is afraid to get up there, then you've got, like, you're going to stand out.
I think that's such a good point, and I think it's also a really good point online too, because I think that we can think like, oh, this space is saturated or whatever. But the truth is, like, most people aren't getting on live stream all that consistently. Most people aren't podcasting regularly. Like most people, like it's just not happening. Like there are a bunch of people here and there, and they drop in and off. But like the people who I see that really create success, and like you can obviously speak to this too, are the people who are consistently speaking and sharing their message all the time, whether that's on a stage or on a live stream or whatever. Like, I think it's just such a misnomer that, like, it's saturated or whatever. It's like very few people are really standing out and speaking all the time, right?
And you know what? Those meeting planners, these people who have to put these meetings together, like whether they're paid events or they're for no fee, I mean,
Hey,
they're
Lisa.
looking for you.
Right.
Like you would do them a huge favor just by raising your hand and saying, "Hey, I'm available."
Totally.
And I mean, you're making their job easier, and you get positioned as the expert in the front of the room.
Well, and especially if we're talking about a statistic of like 90% of people are scared to do it. So yeah, meeting planners are having to look. It's not like they have someone at every turn, right?
Yeah, and another trend that I've noticed in the past couple of years, because meeting planners who are looking to hire me, they've actually said, "Well, I'll get back to you. I just have to finish watching your live streams." And so meeting planners are
Mm,
watching your live streams also. So I'm sure that they're doing a lot of other things. They really are basically stalking you.
totally. I absolutely agree with that. When I've been invited to speak, most of the time, they're like, and we want you to speak on this because we saw you do a live stream on it or saw you share about it or whatever. Like it's very specific. Most people aren't just like, oh, like come on down. They've like watched you or seen something from you before or heard you on a podcast or whatever, right?
Yes, yes.
And so, as far as kind of like speaking being your best form of marketing, that's something I would love for you to talk about because I obviously know the behind the scenes of your business and I see you do that really well all the time where like you are showing up online really consistently and sharing, but you get a lot of clients from in-person events too. And I think a lot of people find that really difficult to bridge that gap of doing both. Like I think people feel like you have to either be totally in-person focused or totally online focused. And I think you just do such a great job there. So can you just share with us like what that looks like for you?
Oh, absolutely. So I love my online presence, but I also love being in person. There are certain local networking groups that I go to. And Lacey, you know that I also hop down to West Palm Beach
Yeah.
as frequently as I can. And there are certain events and networking events that I go to down there on a regular basis when I can. But I also run like a monthly networking group, and it meets once a month, and we call it like a monthly mastermind. And so I'm all about like, it's a little bit of networking, but it's also some education. I always want people to walk away with some sort of a gold nugget that they can put into their life. And so I just, like, so everything that I do is like this, it's basically it's some form of speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just about sharing your knowledge and your education and being able to, so that other people can walk away with something interesting that they just didn't even know. Um, and just making the ask, just like you do
Yeah.
online, with the, hey, like if you want to like jump on a call, or people see your website, when they book a call with you. But I do the same thing when I'm like in the front of the room. I offer the call and people take you up on that offer.
Totally. I think what's so useful to hear, and I can definitely echo this too, is that like ideally you're killing two birds with one stone in that way because you might do a live stream on this topic and then you might go speak on it later or vice versa. So not only is your live stream better but your speech is better, and not only is your speech better but your live stream's better. And so it really makes it so that like you're not having to do different things. You're really doing what we teach all the time, which is like get really good at something and do it over and over and over again and use it everywhere. And I think like that's why speaking is so appealing too, because you can get really, really good at something and then just use it everywhere instead of like trying to kind of get like platform specific good. Like I feel like some people are like, how can I get good at Instagram? Like, I mean, there's merit to that, and I'm not trying to make that wrong, but I think if you can be like, how can I hone a skill that transfers in person, online, across platforms, whatever, that's sustainable strategy, right?
Yeah, just be yourself.
Yeah.
Let your personality come through on whatever platform you've chosen.
So as far as kind of like the I'm scared to start speaking part, because I feel like that's probably something that comes up a lot. Let's see.
Yeah.
Julia says she does this with speaking as well, and it's so wonderful and inspiring to see other women doing this and sharing their mastery. So good. Thank you, Julia. Thank you for being here. Um, so I think that what was I going to say? I just lost my train of thought. Oh, like the scared to speak thing, because I think like I know for me again, like introvert too, like I remember just feeling like, oh my God, like I was going to die at my first speaking event. And you know, the brain does funny things too. So I remember being like, I made a deal with myself. I was like, if you do this one, I promise you, you'll never have to do this again. Like just get up there and do this one, and then you don't have to do it anymore. And then of course after I did it, I was like, what's the next one, you know? But it's like so scary, and like I think I felt that way with my first video, the first time I was on a podcast, all that kind of stuff. So like what are your tips around that? Because I think it's pretty obvious how this is like something you can leverage to get really good at and build a business, but like how do you get over that initial hump?
Well, I actually was just talking to one of my clients this morning who this time last year, I mean, she's an introvert. She was scared to even the thought of speaking, but she did it anyways. She hired me, and she just came back from her first speaking event. She nailed it, and she was like, "Oh my God, I want to do this again."
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I'm so glad, to have like that first one to be so wonderful and impactful. But she was prepared for it. And I think that's a lot of times people, they don't prepare for it. They're not ready. They don't know what they're going to say in front of people. That all of that stuff really gives you that confidence to get up there and share. And remember, like I always think, like if you're nervous, you're thinking about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
When you start to like, how can I be of service to this audience, whether that's online or in person, that takes all that nervousness away, and you are just there to serve and give.
I think that's really good advice. Julia says, cheers to being ourselves and whatever that looks like. So beautiful, Julia. I love that. Yeah, I think that's really good advice, because I even noticed that for myself with like the first videos, live streams, podcast episodes, all that kind of stuff I did, like having just even like a loose plan was really, really impactful. Now it's pretty easy for me for the most part to kind of do it on the fly, but it's not because it's easier for me to do it on the fly. It's just because I've had enough practice at this point. And I think that that's such an undervalued thing in a lot of things, like, because, I teach sales a lot, like sales, which is like people think like it's a skill, you have it or you don't, whatever. And I'm like, sales takes so much practice, like practice. Be prepared, know what you want to say and how you want to deliver it and all that kind of stuff. And I think you were saying the exact same thing, which is like the way to feel good is to feel like you know what you want to get up there and share and how you're doing it.
Yeah, and also just to be totally flexible.
Mm-hmm.
You just never know what's going to happen. I mean, if you're on a sales call, you never know what the objection is, but you're ready to handle it. You just, when you're up in front of an audience, somebody could ask you a question that I just don't have that answer. So what do you do? What do you say? Whether that's on a live stream, like it's a little bit easier to like skip over that question and get back to them later. Yeah. But in front of an audience, it's like, well, what do? You do have to just be fully present and in the moment. Yeah. And just go with the flow.
Which, like, by the way, is also kind of the secret to business, right? Which is like kind of what you were illustrating with your story, which is like, like you kind of did it with like as much preparation as possible, but kind of just figuring it out as you went. And like you built the speaking business, then you pivoted, you built this business, and just kind of like being willing to be present and in the flow instead of trying to see the next 50 steps, right?
Yeah, just worry about today.
I also think that something that I've noticed too is that like when you're on the stage, like people immediately see you as an expert, or when you're on the video or the podcast or whatever. So most people aren't like watching you as closely as you are, or trying to like tear it apart. They're like just listening to the information, and they're just like, what can I get out of this? They're like so infrequently like picking it apart like we think they are, right?
Your audience actually wants to support you. They want you to win. They don't want you to fail. And even if you forget what you're saying, because Lord knows I've been in front of an audience, a live audience, and forgot what I was talking about because somebody like distracted me or asked me a
Yeah,
question. I
yeah.
mean, so it's just like I would just like look at somebody and like, what was I talking about? And they don't care.
They
They
don't care.
actually, they find it funny, and you just keep going. They'll remind you what you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Julia says practice is so valuable and flexible and not assuming we know what to expect. And that gets to be part of the fun and excitement in serving others. I like that. And I think that's a really good way to look at it, which is like, you can be as prepared as you want. You can feel kind of like, um, certain in that. And you can like have that fun and excitement of the uncertainty. And like, really that's sort of the magic, right? Is when both come together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So another thing that I had titled this with, and so I want to make sure that we talk about it too, because I think that obviously it's important, is like you've also used speaking to sell out a membership site and to really grow an online membership site and to leverage that too. And I think that's just, again, so important because what we're illustrating, or what we're attempting to illustrate in this series, is the idea that like there's no perfect way to do it. So like, it's not about like the one perfect launch or the one perfect way that all online businesses do it, or like you didn't use ads or all of that kind of stuff. Like you used what you've always done and known, which was speaking, and you've sold out a membership site with that. So if you could just tell us a little bit about that piece, I think that would be so good.
Well, I think that because I'm all about speaking or some form of speaking, it's like I have to get out there and speak. I can't just send emails and expect people to sign up for my membership
Right.
site or sign up for, to work with me. They have to, it's my personality, my energy, that when people see me on a live stream or see me in person or at one of my, in-person workshops
Right.
that I run, that's what they're just like, oh, like she makes it, like I know sometimes I make it look so easy, but that's because I've also been doing it a little bit longer. But I
Mm-hmm.
also did all those years of like struggling and trying to figure it out on my own.
Right.
And, like there's, yeah, like the membership site, I really enjoy it.
So for you, like when you launch that, like you basically like tell us a little bit about your strategy. Like you speak in person about it, you do live streams online, they kind of people flow in and out of both. Like what does that look like for you?
I When I started it, I did the free training, which is the Get Book training, and that leads into opening the doors to the membership site, because the membership site is the doors are not always open,
Right.
so that I can sort of concentrate on my members and help them make progress. So it was open twice this year, and so yeah, and I used a lot of live streams to share the information, both the trainings and answer anybody's questions, and then to sell the membership site, and it worked very
And
well.
oh, yeah, and something I want to say, just because I know the behind the scenes and I think is really relevant here, is like I know you gave an in-person talk that was like a really big talk for you and was pretty vulnerable and all of that kind of stuff. And then
Oh
you
yeah.
turned around and you did that live stream too. And so what you were doing was refining your process as you went through the launch too. So you spoke in person and got some members there, and then you took that and refined it and spoke online about it. And I just like cannot keep stressing that point enough, because it's like this is like sustainable strategy, right?
Yes. And so here's a question that I get asked a lot. What was your best speech? And I
Mm.
always say, it's my next one.
Yeah.
Because every live stream, every speech, every workshop, every free training that I do, I always look back, all right, like what would I do differently?
Yeah.
And like my client that I was talking to today, I mean, that was one of the things that I asked her, like looking back on the event, what would you do differently so that
Mm-hmm.
her next one will be better? And so I do have a habit of doing that.
And I think it's also helpful because it's like that's like it's what we call repurposing, basically, right? It's like not just this
Mm-hmm.
thing where you like type up a post and then you grab that post and you share it later. Repurposing is also speeches and speaking. And like if you ever have watched like Gary Vee's YouTube, he has the same keynote. Like you could watch one of his keynotes and you've seen all 100 of the keynote videos on there, basically, right? But that's why he gets paid so much and is so fucking fantastic, because he's
Because
probably
he's
delivered that
good.
speech 1,000 times, ones, right?
Yes. Because I get asked a lot, do I have to come up with new content, new stories? And the answer is always like, no. You ever watch a movie more than once?
Right.
And yeah, you know what the ending is. And a lot of times, like I have gotten hired and people have said, will you tell this particular story? Will you do this on the stage?
Right.
Like they've already seen it, but they want it again.
Yep.
Mhm.
And
And
I
yeah, it
think,
just gets better.
right, I think that's so valuable because I feel like that's something I try to stress in a lot of what I'm teaching about business too, which is this idea of like, get really good at something. And when you get really good at something, you can replicate that in so many areas. You can reuse it, you can repurpose it, you can, like, that's how business gets better, faster, and easier, right?
Yeah,
So that's
it
why
does.
this arm of your business, let's say, grew for you really quickly because why? Like you already had the strategy that you'd been practicing for years in the other business, right?
Yes. I, had the speaking skills, so it was just natural for me to fall into this and just like want to share this with other people. And yeah, like I just the story that you're talking about that you alluded to a
Oh,
little
yeah,
bit
yeah.
ago, so just for everybody that's watching, this was a story that I never told in front of an audience. I think only 6 people might have known about this story prior to me sharing this, and I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to share. I'm just going to see what happens. And so even as speaking, like I'm still trying something new. So now I have told that story twice, and I am speaking tomorrow, and I am telling that same story again. This will be the third time,
Yeah,
and
and
it's
I think
just getting better.
and it's just getting better and it gets less charged, right? Like I think that's important too. It's like, sometimes the first time we share like a vulnerable story, it feels so intense, but by the fifth time you're sharing it, you're like, you've almost processed through, right?
Yeah, and like when you're telling a story, your story, you're telling it for the listener
Right.
because they see themselves in their story.
Totally. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
parallel. Listening to your story is just giving them all these
Yeah,
reflections, right?
yeah, yeah.
And I think that what's so important here too is that, like, I think that sometimes we can feel like the online space is more like a hide behind our computers kind of thing. And like the way that this space has been and continues to be moving is quite honestly the exact opposite of that. It is get in front of camera. I mean, like even Insta stories is like such a good example of that. Like people want video and speaking more and more and more and more. And if you're trying to continue to run a business where you don't have to do that, like it's going to be so much harder, I think, right?
Yes, yes. And through video, your personality comes out.
Right.
I mean, sometimes like, it can be hard for people to write and share their personality in a post. But if you're online, I mean, you can, like if you're a goofy person, you can be goofy. If you're
Yes.
serious, you can be serious. If you get for, like if you forget what you were talking about, like no big deal. You can pick up your notes. Like nobody's going to say, "Oh, yeah, she looked at her notes. Yeah, we can't."
That's funny because that's something I feel like I've learned the hard way in translating uh, what I'm good at online to speaking in person. So I am pretty good at being like casual and off the cuff and whatever on live stream. And I remember the first couple times I spoke, I did like the exact opposite. Like I tried to be like perfect and have it memorized and do it exactly right and like all this stuff. And then I was like, oh, same. And then I remember the
Yeah.
next time I did a speech, like I actually like asked people to like pull up their chairs and sit in front of the stage and like made it a lot more casual and all this stuff. And it went so much better and was so much easier for me because I was just like being who I am. And the irony is that like that sounds like such a cheesy thing, but it's like so true. It's like if you just bring that piece of your personality to a video, to a podcast, or to a stage, like the right people buy from you. Like I think I got 2 clients from that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And yeah, the first time you do anything, it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit challenging, but the next time it's going to be a little bit easier. And so, like you finally brought your personality to your
Mm-hmm.
speeches. And like I totally get that because I think my first speech um, just started right away. And I had an abrupt ending. I mean, it literally, I just like, okay, so that's all I have. And if you want to talk to me, you can talk to me in the back of the room. Just came to a screeching halt. But you know what? That even not knowing enough about speaking, like people came up to me and said, do you work with people one-on-one? How can I find out some information? I was just like, what are you talking about? Yeah.
Right, because people really do look up to the people who are standing in front of the room or are willing to get on the video, all that kind of stuff, because we know what it takes to be able to do that, right?
Yes. And there's so many other things that actually happen when you're the person that's in the front of the room, or even on the live stream, is that people go to your website.
Mm-hmm.
People start following you on social media. They opt into your email. They want to know more about you. They'll go and watch all of your videos, especially if you're speaking at a conference. People have to decide, should I go to your session or should I go to some of the other sessions? Even if you're the main speaker, they're still deciding, do I get there early
Right.
to
Mm-hmm.
hear her speak? So they're going to go to so it's like increase web traffic, increase emails, letting people know about like what you're doing and about what you're speaking about. And I also do, like you can do videos, promo videos for the conference.
Mm-hmm.
So now people are getting to know you even before you've even stepped on the stage.
I think what's so great about this too, that I just want to like reiterate here, is like everybody that's, been part of this cited like community and connection is like a huge piece of like building their business. And like obviously, all the women in the mastermind and you guys have all built in a different way, but like that's such a fundamental piece. And so I think what you're saying here too is that this is just another way to facilitate community, to facilitate connection, to facilitate people coming into your community, whether that's your membership or your email list or your social media or whatever. Like it's all the same. And I feel like people get so tripped up on certain things like ads, for example. And I feel like what I want to say about this is like, this is basically just an ad. Like, what are you doing with Facebook ads? You're putting your content in front of a curated audience that supposedly has that interest. And you're paying money for Facebook to present that. There's nothing wrong with ads. I use ads. I like them. There's nothing wrong. But like speaking is literally the same thing. You're putting curated content in front of an audience that supposedly has that interest, and then they're going to take an action from it with the added bonus of like feeling even more of a connection potentially. But like, I think that we just all tend to make strategy so fucking complicated. And like, that's kind of the whole deal, right?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be complicated. And you've heard me say this before, and I just want to add this, that speaking is the gift that keeps on giving.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's never a one and done. Your audience remembers you, and they might be on a committee that's for a conference or for a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
6 months, 1 year down the road, and they'll be contacting you because they might be on your email list or somebody on the committee is. And because that's how a lot of my speaking events have or opportunities have come about, is because, oh, such and somebody saw you speak, and so
Right.
it always leads to it's a domino.
I think something that's true too is that that's how it is in anything that you're putting that consistent time and energy in, right? So like I feel like, that is truly how when we grow things get easier, is because like now I know for you, like you get speaking gigs all the time without really even having to pitch yourself all that much anymore or at all, because like you've cultivated enough of that over time that it kind of flows. And I think like that's what people miss in business sometimes, is they're like, well, how do I get like all the people like banging down my door for discovery calls, or how do I get all the meeting planners reaching out to me or whatever? And it's like, you can, and it is easy, but it just takes that foundation setting, right?
You have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Like I started somewhere. I started with my first opportunity and having to reach out to meeting planners constantly.
Yes.
And you're right. It just gets to a point where it snowballs. Like people know that this is what I do.
Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate you saying that. We're like, that was an effort at the beginning. Like you had to reach out all the time. You had to show up. You had to pitch yourself. And then the tides turn, right? But like, it's so important to hear that. Like, it doesn't start off that way. Like you're not missing something or not ready or whatever if you have to go pitch a ton. Like that's just how it goes, right?
Yeah. And in making this pivot, I had to sort of re-educate people that no, I'm not speaking about leadership anymore. What I'm
Mm,
actually speaking about is to entrepreneurs and how to, this is a form of marketing and visibility. So I sort of
mm-hmm.
had to re-educate everybody.
Totally. And they all came along with it because they knew you already, right? And had that trust with
Hmm.
you.
Hmm.
So for your clients that kind of come to you at the beginning and they're like, freaking out, scared to pitch, that kind of thing, like what do you share with them about pitching and kind of just putting themselves out there?
Well, I give them this template that we start with,
You're like, well, I just make it
essentially.
really easy. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a template that, here's what you use for your warm market, and here's what you would use for a cold market. But let's start with your warm market. Let's start with the
Mm-hmm.
people who do know you. Let's start with the associations and the in-person networking events that you are going to. Let people know that I can be a guest expert on your live streams.
Yes.
Find podcasts that you'd be like a great fit for. And then like after, like once you're done the event or even the podcast, the guest appearance, is to ask them, who else do you know that my message would be great for? Because podcasters know podcasters, meeting planners know meeting planners. And that's how you get the spin-off business. And then it's coming with a referral. Hey, this person just spoke for my podcast, just spoke for my chamber, just spoke for my association. She was fabulous. You might really enjoy her. Here's the connection.
I think that's so beautiful too, because I think it's the thing people are scared to do, just like sales. For example, sometimes like, you're like, follow up, go ask them what made them say yes or no, or, go reach out one more time. And like people are so hesitant to do that, but like it's so results producing and it so never feels as bad as you think it does. And I think that like who else do you know is such an important tip here because it's like that can change everything if you get 5 of those.
Yes.
You just
Yes.
snowballed your speaking career. You just upped your visibility a ton, like all of that. But like you have to ask. And I think that's a really important piece of this conversation too, is that like it does require pitching a lot at the beginning. It does require asking a lot. Like, and none of that's bad. Like that's just part of the process of building, right? But if it gets you to 6 figures, like that's not too shabby.
No, it's kind of fun.
Right?
Doing what you love. Yeah.
So I had asked you this before, and I want to just circle back here again really quick, and then I'll ask you my final question and kind of wrap it up for you. But what has been the hardest part?
I knew you were going to get back to that one
You knew
because
I was
I have a tendency to,
coming.
I have a tendency to just sort of like forget the bad stuff.
Which,
Personality flaw,
hashtag
I guess.
mindset, right?
Yes. I so I guess if I have to pick um, one or two things, what it would, I was taking my business from an in-person to an online.
Right.
So I did have to learn like a lot of new things,
Yeah.
social media wise. And then I would also have to say, like, it was super easy for me, like, to call meeting planners and say, hey, how about, like, it's been a couple of years since I spoke for your, your conference.
Yeah.
That was easy, so now it's like, then I had to like learn how to do sales calls,
Yep.
for one-on-one clients, even like the sales pitch for my membership site in demand. Those were learning moments that, like, was just like, why isn't this working at first?
Yep.
And you're like, well, you've only done it twice.
It's so funny, right? Because like I really appreciate you saying that because like I feel like who at some point does not feel like why isn't this working or why isn't this happening faster or whatever, like in any arena in anything. But it's also like, we have to take our own medicine sometimes where like if you had only pitched to 2 conferences you wouldn't say that. And so it's just so good to be able to see that, right?
Yeah. And
So
I think
good.
the other one that was hard for me at first, because my time was very different, hopping on planes,
Right.
being at a conference. Like I always had like these pre-conference, like routines. And now it was like, like, oh, I had to learn how to schedule my time during the week, which has been, like that was a learning curve for me. But I have to say that was a very beneficial learning curve because now I feel so much more productive
Right.
and in control of my time, so that I can have a life like outside the office because, you know, like I bike with my dad, you know,
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time with him. So that was another learning, that was a learning lesson.
I love that. I think that's super helpful. And again, just like helpful for people to hear that, like, I think it's just so easy to like look at someone and be like, oh, she like is flying all over speaking and she's built this successful business and she like sells out the membership site and whatever. And it must be so easy. And it's like, no, it's like the same. She had to lean into sales. She had to like really rework her time. It's just the willingness to work through that shit that makes the difference, right?
And I know that there's going to be more things that I'm going to learn moving forward.
Totally. So
And I'm open to it.
that
That's the
leads
thing.
me to my last question, which I'm going to have you answer,
Okay.
but I also am going to answer it.
Okay.
Which is, what do you think has been the biggest contributor to you creating a six-figure business?
Can I use the word support?
You may.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. Is support from you, and learning mindset.
Thank you. Look,
It's like
yes.
I have to go with the mindset because there have been times where I said to you, why didn't I learn this years ago? Why aren't you like why?
You know what's so funny? Okay, I love synchronicities like this. So I'm answering this for everybody too. Like what I think was the biggest contributor for them, and what you said was learning mindset, like meaning like learning about mindset. And what my answer is that you always take a learning mindset to things, meaning like you're always willing to learn the next thing. Like you're never like, oh, I don't do that, or I can't learn that, or I'm not into that, or what. Like you just always have a very like progressive mindset in terms of like when a challenge comes, you don't typically like push it away. You're kind of like, well, what do I need to learn here to figure it out and move forward? And so it's kind of perfect how you said that because it's so true, but it also relates to mindset, which is just that willingness to not let things get us stuck, but to just be like, how do I move through this? Right.
Yeah, and it was I another thing would be tenacity. I mean,
Yeah.
I let me try it again. Let me try it again. Just because I failed the first time, let me do it again. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna get this.
Belief
Yes.
that I'm gonna get
Yeah.
this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that when I look at a lot of clients that I see that have like really been successful, no matter what the timeline was, that's always the difference maker. Is were they in that place of like, this is mine? Like, it depends on what the path looks like, but I'm gonna get there, and that's mine. Like there's nobody that is not gonna hack it with that mindset, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so actually I lied. I have one more question and then I want you to tell everyone where they can find you. But the last question is, if you could tell everybody something on here, like what's the one thing you'd want everyone to know?
Speaking is not as scary
Yeah.
as you've made it out to be.
Yeah. It's actually
Find the
kind of fun.
Yeah, find the platform that you feel comfortable with, and that's where you start.
So good. And I think that's really, really important because I do think that like so many people feel like they're not ready because they're scared, or they're not ready because it feels like such a big deal. And it's like, that's not even a thing.
You're more ready than you realize.
Yeah.
Because I also have a belief that everybody has a story
Yeah.
and everybody has a voice, and you have a solution that somebody else is looking for.
Oh, bingo. I love it. Okay, so last question, I promise, but is like, where can they find you? We mentioned, that you do live streams. We mentioned in demand. We mentioned your speaking. Like, where are all the places they can find you?
You can my website is speakandstandout.com, and I run a Facebook group called Entrepreneurs Making an Impact. But if you find me on my business page, Laurie-Ann Murabito, that'll lead you to all of these wonderful places. And I'm on, Instagram. Those are, I would say, Facebook and Instagram and my website are my main places.
Perfect. Can you drop links for us when we jump off so they can get those easily?
Absolutely.
Amazing. So grateful to you. Thank you so much for being here. I feel like this is super, super valuable, and I really like love that. Again, like just another example of like we're all doing it differently, And like, there's, you know, just like no right way. There's just, you know, doing it basically, right? Like the saying
Yeah.
that I love it works if you work it. And like LaurieAnn has worked speaking and it has worked so beautifully and so well for her. So if you resonate with that, that may be the thing for you, but it doesn't have to be the thing for you. And that's the beauty of this, right?
Yes. It's been fun talking to you like this.
Me too. I loved this. All right, my love. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you guys have questions for LaurieAnn, tag her below. Appreciate you all being here and thank you. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.